been a long journey. My first trip to Venice was in 2001.
Yeah.
And when I arrived here, I did see that there was no visibility of any African country. And that's when the dream started. Then 10 years down the line, in 2011, we realized the first Zimbabwean pavilion, which we had 4 artists, Berry Biko, Tafuma Gusa, Kelvin Dondo, and Mishek Masambu. Then the idea of coming back to Venice, it's also all about continuity. You can't just do a one-off. We came in the same venue, and people know that this is a traditional Zimbabwean pavilion venue. So it is very, very important, and that continuity is very, very key, other than us looking for another venue outside.
Absolutely.
Our visibility first in 2011, it was us in South Africa. Now we are joined by Ivory Coast, Angola, which has won the Golden Lion Award, which is also very, very important for the African artists and art world. Well, I mean, the Arts Cabinet project, that collaboration between the National Gallery and the Arts Cabinet, I think it's one of a step forward, because Berry Biko, who is going to collaborate and work and research together with Uriel, this is a continuity, because Berry Biko was one of the Venice Biennale artists in 2011. So all that coming together, it brings those two energies. And for us as a National Gallery, I think it is our key important thing to do, to collaborate and to work with other institutions. It's a research base, so I mean, it's a process. And the artists we've put together, Uriel and Berry, these are the artists who have been working more with archival material. So I think it will pan out in a more dynamic way because of the National Gallery of Zimbabwe. It's the center of the contemporary art in Zimbabwe. And the collaboration, I think we need to bring in other players like the National Archive of Zimbabwe, which I think that collaboration would really bring another energy to complement what we're trying to do. Then when they come to the UK, that will also open up new energy. Dr. Frank McEwen, or Professor Frank McEwen as they want to call him, it is a very, very important, he's a very, very important figure into the Zimbabwean contemporary art scene as the founding director of the National Gallery. And, peeking into that archive would bring a huge energy into the project. Not only that, but I mean the idea to also put it to the public, to get an understanding, the contribution this man did to this beautiful gallery, which I'm sure one day you'll be able to come, because from my own perspective, it's one of the most beautiful contemporary building in the continent. It's a purpose-built gallery, and his ideas of coming out to realize that building, which was designed by Peter Oldfield, and that building is an amazing. So that archive would really be very, very, very key to this particular project. And very, very important to the National Gallery at large, and to the Zimbabwean community. I would say very little is known about that archive. And the idea that, the archive, if there's a way to bring it back into the continent and to open it up to the Zimbabwean audience and to the Zimbabwean context where it belongs.
We are excited about the project because the idea of archival engagement and research as a sort of a basis to inform art it's of course it's very interesting. It's something that it can set the tone for even for exhibition creating. The fact that there is need to consult and to research. So I think that's a basic premise, which is it's a good example. It will inform our processes better, and I think that's a good one. I'm familiar with the work of Berry Biko as a Zimbabwean artist, and over the years, most of her work has been framing the whole sort of archival investigation, and I think largely to sort of underline or explore her identity as being, I would say, a white African. And I think that the works that I've seen from the 80s were based on understanding her particular identity, but also understanding the sort of the relationships that have come out of this encounter the sort of the colonial versus indigenous encounter. And I always found that to be very fascinating. For the country, very interesting, because these are things which have happened and they explain a lot. And I think by conducting research into it, there are many answers. There are many answers, and I admire her work for that. Not only have you've got the Frank McEwen archives, but you've got the early missionary archives, which are located in one or two of the old mission schools. Some of them are there, some of them we've collected because they've been sort of abandoned. But they do tell a very interesting story as to how the idea of modern art and depiction was introduced and how it was stimulated and how the youngsters in the schools made art and how they were directed, even at the mission schools, to decorate spaces, churches, walls. So I think that there's a multi-layered sort of research to be done, which has to go back before Frank McEwen to be able to give a complete picture. So I think it's interesting for us because we have some of the collections of the early drawings from the schools. We know where some of them are in England. We're in touch with researchers who we've often talked about having a show which brings some of those works back to the gallery to join with pieces that we have already. So this can tell a more complete story as to what really happened, because it's always interesting that, you know, how people started. When we've done our sort of research, we've been forced to acknowledge the fact that even some of the people who came into sculpture under his sort of guidance were driven towards him because that was their inclination and their experience in the past, especially from the schools. Already by the 40s, young people, especially the missionary schools, were being taught to draw, largely for religious purposes, instruction and depiction of biblical themes and so on, but nonetheless having that as a subject. And I think those who had an inclination were already getting recognition. There are already exhibitions that are taking place even overseas of these early drawings. So I think when you look at a person like Nicholas, who became one of the foremost sculptors, his linear style was already well defined in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions before the arrival of Frank. From the archives of McEwen, we've studied them a lot in terms of his language, his take on what was going on. And there's still controversy as to what sort of exposure the artists or the potential artists received within a gallery setting, because within a gallery setting, of course, there's art. And what we're finding now, just quite accidentally, because we've recently had occasion to access some of the very early works, and we're finding that there are some depictions there which are obviously externally influenced, obviously copies of Greek, Chinese models. And that's also telling us something, that, wow, maybe some of these guys started at copying, like all arts trainees do, something that existed, getting confident, and then evolving their own style. So I think it's very good that there's research going on, because it's an area which is virgin territory in terms of Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean people getting involved. Often you find that there have been researchers who've come from outside, and they have a different take on things and so on. So I think it's very good. I think it'll be good for current practice going forward.